Can evolution and the Bible coexist? I think it can, and this is my part 3. So if you'd like to catch up, you can go back and watch part 1 and 2. I have them labeled. They are labeled as Origins of Life Part 1, or Origins of the Universe, and Origins of Life of the Universe Part 2. And for the sake of time, and because I am doing kind of an overview, because this gets very in-depth. So this is actually just an overview of some of my thoughts and my hypotheses on this. So I'm going to be starting in Genesis verse 6. I've already covered the first 5 verses in the other 2 videos. It says, "Then God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse," or firmament in the King James Version. "And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day." So we have where he created the firmament, or the expanse, and separated the waters. Now I've already gone into water can exist in several states. It can exist as a vapor, liquid water, or a solid, which is ice, and depending on the temperatures. So when I was going through the Big Bang, the Big Bang Theory, and in verse 1, and God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. That word void can also mean chaos in Hebrew, but the meaning that I came up with is basically the same that I went through in my previous video. And God's and as far as the light, it's not the sun, because the sun and the moon were not created yet, not till the 4th day. So God was the catalyst. Now we know that he is also God is light, and he is energy. So I just want to kind of pull up. So what God said, let the expanse in the midst, that word midst also means within the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. So to me, I believe that the firmament was actually the ozone. Now when you're going through how the earth was formed originally, we know that there was a lot of volcanic activity, that there were a lot of explosions, a lot of that was releasing gases and stuff into the atmosphere, and it took a long time for oxygen, which is needed, oxygen and hydrogen are both needed to create water, so it took a long time for that to actually form. And prior to that, there's what's called, so the scientists have found this thing, which they call the Great Unconformity. And they found, the first scientists notated it, I believe, was in the early 1800s. It got recognition more in the early 1900s. And it's noted all across the world, in the Grand Canyon, Australia, the Swiss Alps, Canada. This is the Great Unconformity. If you look it up, basically they say that they can see where the earth was building up layers, and they can see the layers in the sediment, and then it's very solid, and then it stops. And for scientists, they're saying there's about 12 meters, or several, about a quarter to a third of the Earth's history that isn't there, that seems to have eroded or disappeared, because it seems like it stopped and then all of a sudden it started again. When I'm reading Genesis, to me that makes sense, because there are, like, around uranium deposits and everything, they have found where there was actual nuclear fission that occurred naturally within the earth, and those deposits were very unstable, mostly around where they find where they find uranium. So when you're thinking about how the earth is forming with all this volcanic activity and everything, and they're saying that there was a lot of radiation and everything, and thinking about God as being the catalyst and being like energy, to me it makes absolute sense. And then they said all of a sudden everything kind of kick-started again. It all happened around the same time as what they call the Cambrian explosion, which basically said the earth exploded. Around the same time, the magnetic field of the earth was lowered, so it was higher, then it was lower again for dropped down to like 10% of what it is today. And then shortly right after that, so 3 things happened at once. There was what they call the explosion of life. So Moses, not having any knowledge of this and writing how everything progressed in Genesis, when I look at this, it makes absolute sense. So God, first he had to form the earth, and then he separated the waters. So we have all this vapor that's built up. We have the Cambrian explosion, again, God's the catalyst. There's an explosion, and all of a sudden the sediment starts again. So to me, it makes sense. It's not that it's missing. I think the Lord was letting the earth cool, that was the end of the first age, because in my first video I talked about how a day is actually an age or a period of time, and we don't know what a day was to God. Could be, it says that 1,000 years is as of a day and a day is of 1,000 years, but we don't actually know what a day is to God. We measure it by the sun and moon, but the sun and moon weren't created yet. So there's no way to know what that day actually was to God. It could have been anywhere from 1,000 years to billions of years. So that was the end of the first age. And then the next age, we have the firmament. So that atmosphere is created. We have the firmament, which is the ozone layer, in my opinion, my hypothesis. And God separated it. And then the next thing that happens, it says, then God said, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. So we know that the next thing that happened was all the waters gathered together and the dry land appeared. And we know that they say that there was more than one supercontinent, but the one most people are familiar with is Pangaea. So that again makes sense to me when I'm reading Genesis, because it falls in order. Then he called the gathering of the waters he called the seas, and God saw that it was good. Let me back up to verse 10. God called the dry land earth, which can also be translated in Hebrew as soil or land. And the gathering of the waters he called the seas, and God saw it was good. Then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit after their kind, with seed in them. And it was so. And we know that plants had to come first because of photosynthesis to build the atmosphere up in the oxygen. And we do know that scientists have said that was kind of like the next thing that kind of started to happen after the primordial soup, after the first rain, which again falls in line with the waters gathering, because they say there was a deluge of rain. So the waters had to come from somewhere. And I believe that was it. Then the next thing that happened, and then the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding after its kind, and fruit with seeds in them after their kind, and God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day, or third age. Now they say that the earth is 4.5 billion years old, and life started about 3.8 billion years ago. But what they define as life is not like us and the animals and everything we have here. It was very different. It was very dry. And that actually does fall in line with stuff that's later described in the Bible. I haven't gotten to yet, but I will. So the next thing that happened is God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heaven to give light on the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth and to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, a fourth day, or a fourth age. So at this point, I think they're saying that the universe basically was chaos. So this is God basically bringing everything into order. We know that they say an asteroid hit the earth, and all the particles that came up eventually formed from the gravitational pull to form the moon. That's one of the theories. So this what I'm saying here is like all of this crazy stuff is happening in the universe, and God just kind of brought order to all of it. And those are my late night thoughts.